And I'll apologize in advance because I'm at a disadvantage as to what was really discussed last time. I read the minutes, but I didn't watch the meeting. So feel free to interrupt me if I get anything wrong, guys. Okay, so let's go ahead and go straight to review and approval of meeting minutes for August. Like what month was that? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Oh, I heard a Doug say so moved.
Yep, I did. There we go. Perfect. Rich seconded, I believe.
Wait,
Great.
Who moved? Who second?
I think Rich seconded.
Who moved?
Doug moved.
Oh, okay.
You just may want to, I thought I read last week, there might have been one typo, but I didn't.
It was D with advocates.
Is that it?
Yeah, I know. I'm a
Did I say advocates?
advocates, but that's okay. You know what? We knew what you meant.
Edit anyway, so you don't need to require a motion.
Exactly. So it's just a spelling correction. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Looks like that's unanimous with everybody that's in attendance. All right, we have special guests tonight. Kate, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Pardon me?
Can I interrupt? I was just curious, did we need to approve minutes from the special meeting, or do those not need to be approved?
No, because it was a subcommittee meeting, and so we actually don't take notes, we just record those. There's no formal, because then you would come back here to make any formal action. So those are subcommittee meetings that are handled a little bit differently because they're not the full board.
Got it. That works. Yep. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, though. It says here, effective approach to rehousing the unhoused. Is that an appropriate title for what you're here to talk to us about tonight?
My understanding, and again, I wasn't at the last meeting either, obviously,
right, exactly.
So feel free to correct me, but my understanding is that the Inclusivity Board was interested in having a conversation around what Houston's doing, and is this something Westminster could do, or maybe the Denver metro area. Is that correct? Am I on target? Are there nuances that I need to know about?
That sounds familiar.
Sounds good. Getting lots of nods.
Okay. So I am not going to pretend to be an expert on Houston. I will not speak for Houston. I can't. I've lived here my entire life. That said, I've been very aware of the Houston initiatives for the last 5+ years. They started getting national attention about 5 years ago, and it really hit a tipping point in June of 2022 when the New York Times ran an article about Houston's success in solving homelessness. And at this point, since 2012, Houston has gone from being the 6th worst city in the nation on homelessness to having housed over 28,000 individuals in the last 12 years. And there's a number of things they've done that have helped with that. And there are some things that are very specific to Houston that we probably aren't able to replicate here, but there are lessons we're already employing here too from Houston and from other best practices across the nation. So one of the things they did is in 2012, after having been declared the 6th worst city in the nation, a couple of things magically happened. The federal government declared that they were a priority city. And so the federal government made housing vouchers and additional funding available to Houston. And not just Houston, but Houston's part of a continuum of care that HUD requires that every region have if they want to address homelessness through the use of federal funds distributed by HUD. So the continuum of care actually covers both Houston and all of Harris County and Fort Bend County, and now I'm not going to remember the third county. I want to say it's Montgomery County, but there's 3 counties, and those 3 counties, which include Houston, basically have worked together to be able to house over 28,000 people over the last 11 years. Like I said, they had additional housing vouchers that were available to them through the federal government. strictly through HUD, but they also had something happen that I want to say we can't have happen in Colorado, but I guess with climate change, we can't rule it out. Hurricanes. At this point, we don't have that as a realistic threat, as a natural disaster, but we certainly can get winds that are hurricane strength. However, in 2017, they had Hurricane Harvey, which destroyed 16,930 homes and damaged another 290,000. Those homes all needed to be replaced. Many of the individuals did not have housing for a long time. FEMA made additional funding available, as did other resources from the federal and state levels. And so they had even more streams of funding pouring into Houston to address housing crisis that they were experiencing because of the increasing levels of homelessness that they'd had prior to Harvey, but overnight, over almost 17,000 residents lost their homes. So if you can imagine the Marshall Fire, but 17 times that. So they've had this huge wave of funding pour in that has helped with housing. They also, and this is true even prior to 2012, in Houston and the 3 counties, they do not have the same land use zoning that we have here in Colorado. So there are no restrictions on denser housing. So they can build apartments without going to public hearings and having NIMBYism, the not in my backyard, shoot down denser developments that are more easily able to pencil out on a financial level for developers to actually turn a slight profit and be able to build more housing. So those are the distinctions of Houston that we don't have here. And I'm personally grateful we don't have the hurricane issue. All that said, what they do have there is a continuum of care called the Way Home that works with more than 100 partner agencies across the region. These are homeless service providers to actually house people. And they work in tandem with one another in much the way that the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative works with the over 100 partner agencies we have in the Denver metro region. So we've already got that partnership taking place. What we haven't had traditionally in the metro area is and Houston faced this before 2012 as well. HUD continuums of care are set up to be grant applicants. Well, let me rephrase that. The continuums of care distribute the grant funds from HUD based on a granting process that all the service providers compete for the grant funds. So what that fosters is at a federal level through HUD policy, the service providers are competing with one another for grant funding. And we have that same situation here in the Denver metro area. The MDHI distributes roughly $27 million in a normal year. During COVID, we had additional funding coming through HUD through a number of different venues, whether it was MDHI, whether it was the state, the Department of Local Affairs, Division of Housing, or the state level itself. We had CARES Act funds, and we also had what's known as ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds that flowed to assist with housing. The way Colorado used the Colorado agencies across the state and definitely within the Denver metro area used funding from those sources was largely for eviction prevention. So emergency rental assistance was distributed at a scale and scope we have never before seen. And aside from the fact that for the first 9 months of COVID, there were no evictions allowed under Colorado state law because of the emergency orders of the governor. Even once those restrictions were lifted, there were very few evictions taking place. Whereas prior to COVID, we had fairly large scale evictions. In fact, Adams County was one of the top counties in the entire nation for eviction rates prior to COVID. So by preventing homelessness from happening for financial reasons, then we did not see homelessness rise while those eviction prevention funds were in existence. But what wasn't happening in Colorado is we've continued to have public hearings for denser housing that's more financially viable for affordable housing and below the 30% of the average median income. So we continue to have the housing constraint issue that Houston doesn't face. But we have seen tremendous success with preventing evictions on the front end, and that therefore preventing homelessness. Now, once the rental assistance has started to run out, it's not completely gone yet, but it has slowed down. And what we have seen is a rise in evictions again, in some cases higher than what we saw prior to COVID. But we just don't, we have more people that have been moving into the Denver metro area, and we haven't been building enough housing to keep up with the number of people moving in. And consequently, land values have risen, rents have risen, mortgage costs have risen because of inflation as well as rising property values. So we are continuing to see housing constraints here that they do not see in Houston. You can still get a single bedroom apartment in Houston for about $700 a month. Those same size apartments here in the Denver metro area go for over $1,300 a month.
And I would assume that average median income is roughly the same?
Average median income is not roughly the same because Texas has a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour.
Oh, so it's even worse for them.
It's worse, but it actually pencils out better.
Okay.
And they've got more housing vouchers to be able to distribute.
Got it. Okay.
So for those that are earning minimum wage, they qualify for housing vouchers. So as long as they can make 30% of the $700 rent, they're able to pay for their housing. Whereas here,
right,
we don't have the housing vouchers, and therefore we have much higher rents.
If we had the housing vouchers, sorry to interrupt you, would we have enough housing?
That I do not know for sure. That's something I think our housing assessment will help us better identify here in Westminster, as well as regionally. The other governments are all doing housing assessments in the next six to 12 months. So we'll have a better understanding on paper of what the housing market really looks like here. But right now, just even using Zillow data and using the National Low Income Housing Coalition out of reach report, housing is a lot more obtainable in Houston and in Texas than it is here.
Didn't mean to derail you.
No,
Sorry.
no, not at all. I'm going to pause there because I've just thrown a lot of data at you and a lot of similarities and some differences. And I want to see what questions do you have? And Doug, I see you've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
I do, thanks. You might have said it, but I missed it. What is the source of the funding for those housing vouchers that we don't have? Is that federal? Is that something we could apply for? What's the story behind those?
Housing vouchers are created by HUD, and it's created based on some formula that I have not ever seen. I will tell you that in the current federal fiscal year, the federal government did distribute and had budgeted for an additional 200,000 housing vouchers nationwide. Westminster has benefited from those housing vouchers because that's why our navigators currently have 16 households waiting to be housed. They have housing vouchers. We've got the folks in hotels as they're actively searching for housing that works for them. But finding landlords here that will accept the vouchers is another issue. And I think that issue probably also exists in Texas, just because there's more paperwork involved with federal vouchers. But I haven't read anything about Houston. Houston specifically has several nonprofits that are dedicated to building relationships with the landlords and the property owners so that they help those landlords and the property owners fill out the paperwork that's required for those vouchers to be used. Here, Aurora, the city of Aurora has a position that's dedicated to that. And 2 of the homeless service providers that are nonprofits have a single person dedicated to that. And aside from that, there's nothing that's really, there's no supports for it here. So.
Does that seem like it is a good leverage point? Would things be a lot easier if there were guides to help with that paperwork, or is the paperwork sort of small potatoes in comparison to a lot of the other stuff?
I think the paperwork is a barrier, because raise your hand if you love paperwork. Cody does, so Cody could help us with this, but yeah. So the paperwork's a barrier in and of itself, but then there's also this reluctance on the part of landlords to, well, what if there's damage to the property? Because of the public perception of people experiencing homelessness. Clearly, according to the way the public mindset works, if somebody's living in a camp like that, what are they going to do to my brand new unit that I've had to refit with new carpeting and new appliances for the move-in date? I'm having to invest all this money as a landlord and a property owner, but it's going to be ruined if I accept that voucher. And in a way, the paperwork serves as kind of almost an excuse in some instances, not in all instances. We've got some great property owners. We've got some great landlords that are willing to work with us. In fact, a number of the property owners, once they've worked with the navigators a little bit, we now have property owners that reach out to our navigators and say, hey, I've got 2 units coming open. Do you have anybody who might need this type of a unit? So that relationship building with the property owners and the landlords and the management firms, that helps.
Okay.
It definitely helps just overcome that perception and that potential of the fear that the property will be destroyed in some way.
Yeah, Kate, for the vouchers, is it a set dollar amount that the landlord has to accept?
The landlord is not allowed to charge more than the fair market value for most of the vouchers. And then the landlord is basically guaranteed that right up front, 70% of their monthly payment is guaranteed by the federal government. And I know I've heard sarcastic comments about the federal government, but honestly, I know we go to the brink every so often on, will the federal government default on its debt? And it goes to that brink, and for decades now, they've run it back. So it's guaranteed income on the part of the property owner. And then the other 30% is dependent upon the income that that individual is able to pay toward that housing unit.
Are these individuals usually employed when they qualify for these vouchers?
Some are, some aren't. Some are unable to work, and so they receive Social Security disability or some type of other disability payment, and that income goes toward their 30% of the rent.
But they've been already pre-vetted to be able to accommodate that 30%.
Right.
Okay. Seems like a win-win for landlords, actually.
It is, and because of public perception, it's also a risk.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And sometimes that risk is fair. They've tried it before, and the person didn't have the supports that they truly needed, and things didn't work out, and the property was damaged, or they decided to let in others that they knew who were sleeping outdoors and violated the terms of the lease, and it does happen. But if there are some levels of supports available, because it's not just getting people housed. That's the other thing Houston does, and the Denver metro area with MDHI, we are committed to doing it. It's called Housing First. but that's not housing only. It's housing plus supports. And it's frequently misunderstood that, oh, all it takes is housing. Well, no, of course it doesn't. None of us just need a house. We definitely need a roof over our heads. Everybody does. And we also need food. And we also need to be able to get to medical appointments. And if we're able to work, we want to be able to work. And if we're able to contribute in some way, shape, or form to society, we want to be able to do that. And if we need mental health supports, we need access to those. And whatever the issue is, if we need education, they have the same needs the rest of us do who are housed. It's just they might have more barriers to getting to those services. So making sure that they can get to them is important.
MDHI is Metro Denver Homelessness Initiative?
Homeless initiative.
Homeless Initiative.
Just 4 letters short.
Yeah. So you touched on the continuum. Oh, sorry, Rich, go ahead. I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, I actually have 2 questions. You do hear this fear about that, well, these people are going to come into my property and damage it. And I don't know how much of that is prejudice and how much of it is supported by facts. Is there any statistical data around that? That's my first question. Second question is, how are we collaborating with neighboring communities?
Great questions. I have not run across data one way or the other than from our own Navigator program on have the housing units been damaged in the 75 plus households we've placed in housing. No, they have not. But that's a fairly small sample pool too. So it's not statistically, oh yeah, across the country, we can say that. And I will say from conversations with permanent supportive housing providers, if you've got somebody in a unit who has actually been diagnosed with schizophrenia, then there is the chance. But again, if you're providing the supports necessary, you can mitigate that risk and you can perhaps even eliminate it. As far as how are we collaborating with the other entities, we are a voting member of the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative. Not all of our neighboring jurisdictions are. Most are. I work closely. In fact, the meeting I had before this was I shouldn't say all, but it was with a sample representation of jurisdictions across Jefferson County. I am routinely in meetings with all of the jurisdictions in Adams County, including the county. I'm regularly in meetings with Denver, and more importantly, though, where are the service providers in this? And because we have more than 100 service providers. Yes, the Denver metro area has 7 counties and 39 cities, but we have over 100 service providers. And are all of the service providers at the table? I think largely the service providers themselves are. It's the other sectors that may or may not be at the table, depending upon which county you're talking about. Is the business community at the table? Are the foundations at the table? Because that's another secret sauce part of the recipe for Houston, is their foundations have stepped up and dedicated millions of dollars in funding toward housing. So has their business community. So has their Chamber of Commerce. Are all of the faith-based organizations at the table? Are all the medical sectors at the table, including behavioral health as well as physical health? Homelessness is the education sector at the table, and it varies. I see different sectors at the table in each county, and and not just in Adams and Jeffco, but in conversations I've had with my counterparts in Arapahoe County and Douglas County and Boulder County and Denver County and Broomfield, there's different sectors at the table in every one of them, but we really need to have all of the sectors at the table and activating around the issue and saying, what can we do to solve homelessness? How can we help with the housing shortage? How can we help with the fact that there's not enough housing for people earning minimum wage here in Colorado? Because ultimately that's what's causing homelessness. And I see that in homeless management information software, database information. I see that in the point in time data, the annual census of people experiencing homelessness. I see that in conversations our navigators have with people. It's time and time and time again, we see that the primary cause of homelessness in the Denver metro area is financial, that the wages do not pay for housing here. The housing wage, what it takes to earn a single bedroom apartment in the Denver metro area this year is $34.83 an hour. If you do not earn that, you're not getting into an apartment, you're not getting into a house unless you have a housing voucher. Or unless you're doubled and tripled up with other families and households, which may or may not be a safe situation. From a fire code situation, it's not a safe situation if you've got more people living in a unit that are intended to be in that unit.
Do you have any insights into what gets those other organizations to come to the table, or what keeps them from coming to the table?
I think there's a wide variety of things, and it probably varies from organization to organization. I think one of the major barriers in conversations I've had with people, and again, small sample size, just the few hundred people I've had conversations with around this, is that they don't see themselves as having a role in the solution, or they don't even think homelessness is solvable. And homelessness, by its very name, we have the solution in the name. It's homes, or if you're referring to people as unhoused, it's housing. It's not the only part of what's needed, but it is the major part of what's needed. And if you don't have that, are you going to make it to your medical appointments that you need?
Right.
Are you going to get to your job? Are you going to be able to get employment or stay employed? Are you going to be able to make it to your Social Security office recertification? All of those things present barriers to people who are living outdoors.
In the Houston model, they have the services coming in, or some services are on site?
It depends. I think in different areas, they have different supports depending upon what they need. But at this point, Houston, let me make sure I'm getting the figure right. In fact, I printed it off. So Houston, in this year's point in time, Houston and the 3 counties, I should say, they identified that they have, even with all the progress they've made, all of the national attention they've gotten, they still have 3,270 people experiencing homelessness that they found on that single night in those 3 counties. And most of them were actually in Houston. So Harris County has more concerted, there's actual services. Fort Bend County and Montgomery County, it was Montgomery County. They don't have nearly as many services, which might also drive how many people they have experiencing homelessness, because where can you go to get services? If you want them, you're going to be, and you see that you can benefit from them, you're going to go to where you can actually get served. So they do say that they are able to house people who are actually living outdoors far more easily than they're able to house people that are doubled and tripled up, or sometimes spending the night at this neighbor's house or that family member's home. That they actually, the people there, and this only counts the people that are actually living outdoors or staying in shelters. So those others that are doubled or tripled up are not counted in this point in time count, which is true nationally.
So my understanding, I'm not sure if I got this right, with Houston, they started this at an economic downtime in the country. How did the principals get together and say, let's break up the silos and let's all work together.
It sounds like the COC was really good at bringing them together and that they had political will to do so from the elected officials. And that, and they also made, I did read this in several different places, is that they made the decision to ensure that the task force was comprised of other sectors. So it wasn't driven by government. It was government was at the table, but for the most part, it was all the other sectors that are able to bring more than funding to the table. That expertise on providing services to people in trauma and crisis. But like I said, even with that, they have seen homelessness rise there slightly in the last 2 years. And they are heading into a time where they're becoming fairly fearful because the federal funds for COVID are running out. They're no longer a priority city, so they're not getting those, they won't be continuing to receive those additional housing vouchers. They'll continue to receive the ones they already have. The people who have them will continue to be supported through those vouchers. But anybody becoming homeless will not have access to as many vouchers as they currently do. They are also, the mayor is term limited in Houston, and the mayor is the one who brought these sectors to the table, especially the Houston Foundation that was not actually affiliated with the city. It's a completely separate nonprofit, standalone, and they provided $15 million last year alone toward housing. And largely for supports for housing. So the mayor's term limited. They've got it's kind of a similar situation, it sounds like, to the Denver situation, where they've got more than 12 candidates already running for mayor. And the candidate in the kind of polling the highest, you never know if the polls pan out though, right? But the candidate polling the highest wants to take a very different approach to homelessness than what's been taken, because it was the candidates that are in the current running pool seem to feel that it was really this mayor's initiative and they want to do something different. So it's the political wins problem. And at the same time, their president of their COC is retiring at the end of this year. And so the two main regional driving forces as individuals are no longer going to be at the table starting next year. So there's some big question marks in Houston's mind, in Harris County's mind, in the COC's mind, and in everybody looking at Houston going, will that last? How can they sustain it?
With veterans that are homeless, does that money also come from HUD, or is that VA money? And so how does the voucher work for that? Because I know of someone, it took a long time to get him housed. It was his issue, but he finally just said he just couldn't take it anymore. He had to, but that comes from VA? Is it a different pool of money?
It comes from both. But the HUD, what it is they're called HUD VASH vouchers. HUD being the department that focuses on housing development across the U.S. And the VA, of course, is the Veterans Administration. So they partner together to provide funding and supports for the HUD VASH vouchers, is what they're known as. Those HUD VASH vouchers have 3 times the paperwork as the regular HUD vouchers because military apparently loves paperwork even more than I think anybody should. Even more than HUD. Who knew? Doug.
You refer to the region, Houston and its 3 counties, Denver and all of its counties. 2 questions come out of that. First of all, what was our point in time count compared to Houston's? And then what is the mobility of these individuals? Is this truly a regional issue with a regional solution? Or do we have Westminster individuals and we need to deal with our Westminster community. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. So I thought you might ask about the regional point in time. So I did, instead of relying on my memory, I went ahead and printed that out. So this year's point in time showed that the 7 counties that comprise the Denver metro area for the HUD COC for this area counted 9,065 people experiencing homelessness in both shelters and in unsheltered situations. Those also include people who are staying in hotels being paid for by agencies, like many of our Navigator clients and the Adams County Severe Weather Activation Plan clients. They're counted as part of the sheltered count. So that's both. We wound up with 2,763 who were unsheltered across the region. Of the 9,065, Adams County, for the first time ever, we have more resources, so we were able to do a better job of being able to be out counting. And we also activated emergency shelters that night because it was an extremely cold night. So we had people staying in our emergency shelter at Countryside. And so we sent volunteers out to count there too. So Adams County wound up with 980 some odd people counted, and Jefferson County was 970 some odd people counted. So our county's almost doubled. But like I said, this was the first full point in time since every jurisdiction's had some level of type of street outreach. And it's also become an increasingly politically visible. And so we had a tremendous response from the volunteer community in Westminster. We were able to get 45 volunteers out to count that night. That's more than 3 times the number we've ever had in the past. Jefferson County had over 97 volunteers. Adams County had 50 volunteers. So Westminster alone, we had almost as many volunteers as all the rest of Adams County except Aurora did. So our community really turned out for that, and I'm really proud of our community for that. Yes, we have homelessness in Westminster. That's why we have that's why we have the homeless navigators who are focused on housing, and they have been able to get people housed. But it is a slow going process because of all the paperwork that's involved. And for most situations, most clients, they have to start with, in order to be able to apply for housing, you need to have all of these identifications ready to go, including your birth certificate and your social security card and your driver's license or a current photo ID from the state. So the navigators, when they're really sitting down to talk with somebody about, okay, you want housing, let's get you started with all of the paperwork that's necessary for that. So it's a slow going process. And once somebody has a housing voucher, it's taking us an average of 4 months to find a housing unit that they're able to move into. Some of that has been because of the COVID supply shortages. We've had people whose move-in dates have been delayed by 3 weeks because they couldn't get an oven installed, or they couldn't get the carpeting installed. The carpeting was delivered, but there was no labor force to be able to install the carpeting. So we've had those types of delays happening too. So housing has just been slower because of COVID realities, and coming out of COVID, what the labor market looks like and supply chain challenges we're still occasionally having, not like we did a year or 2 ago, but at one point there was a paint shortage. Who knew?
Yeah.
But they couldn't pass housing inspections without the appliances and the new flooring. So
right. So I guess what I didn't phrase particularly well is the individuals that we have in Westminster. Is that basically the same group of individuals? When we talk about a regional solution, how much does a regional solution, what does what Aurora does have to do with what happens in Westminster?
well, the regional solution, there's a couple of things there. So we use the same database that all of the jurisdictions use that are the database is provided to us for free from MDHI. through HUD funding. So the best data I have on, are these folks coming from elsewhere? Are they not coming from elsewhere? Is HMIS, that database data. And the 2023 report, which that fiscal year for the report that MDHI provided ended on June 30th of this year. So it's relatively recent data. Of the 33,000 some odd people experiencing homelessness across the state of Colorado that came into contact and worked with the service provider over the course of July 1st of 2022 to June 30th, 87% of those people were experiencing homelessness in the jurisdiction they had last been permanently housed. Some of the other 13%, some came from out of state because they were coming from a state where minimum wage is $7.25 and our minimum wage is more than double that. So it sounds like, well, we should be able to get housing there and it should solve our financial problems. But they get here, they have a job, and then they're frequently stranded because they can't get housing here and they don't know anybody to be able to stay with them. So there is a small percentage coming from out of state or coming from a different county, but for the most part, they're staying pretty close to where they last experienced permanent housing.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? We probably have time for one more if anybody else has any questions. I actually do, if nobody else does. All right. And I hate to ask this question, just sounds really awful, but do we have an idea of like just how much money it takes per unhoused person to get them in a stable situation? And then do we know how long typically that person will remain in a subsidized situation before they reach independence?
Okay, so there's two inherent questions.
There are.
So I'll tackle the question of how much does it cost? The best study I've seen, it was the comprehensive nationwide study done by the Department of Justice. Federal Department of Justice in 2015 calculated that it cost over $22,000 to house a person that it was in jail or prison.
Okay.
And it cost $12,000 per person to house them with supports. Now, in the Denver metro area, 7 years later, with market rates being what they are, those costs have definitely gone up. But guess what? So have our jail and prison costs. So it still costs less to house people than it does to house them in jail or prison. Because inflation rates and labor markets being what they are, those costs have all risen pretty much uniformly, as much as anything does across the free market economy. And then the second part of the question was how long till somebody achieves sustainability, self-sustainability. I'm going to have to say that the hard answer is that completely depends on that particular individual. Because if somebody became homeless because they aged out of foster care and they didn't have the social network to support them once they turned 18 and aged out of the foster care system, then an 18-year-old in my home, when they hit 18, I'm still going to provide them with financial supports. So how long does it take a young adult to be able to achieve self-sufficiency? And then if somebody's on disability because they've had to go through all of the hoops and the hearings to be able to prove they cannot work, they will not achieve self-sufficiency.
Right. And I think that's a no.
You guys muted.
Yeah, we've lost your audio, guys. We've lost the audio from the table.
Hello, we've lost your audio.
They've lost us.
Yes, they have. Technology is just imperfect.
Oops.
I just sent a message to Jake.
Oh, that
This
was
is Kate.
aggressive.
Better at Teams than I am.
All right, can you guys hear us now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, Kate, for letting us know.
Yes.
So anyways, you'll follow up on that. I'm just curious,
Yeah.
just from the standpoint of just trying to make the arguments for why we should do this, and it's not going to cost us the world to help.
It's not. And will there be ongoing costs?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. But yeah, exactly. Jillian, did you have one? Do you have a question, or were you just trying to tell us that you couldn't hear us?
I did have a question. I know we're running really short on time.
Yeah,
so
I just want to be mindful of Kate Cook's time since she's speaking tonight too.
I know, I'm so sorry. I'll try and make it so quick. In talking about costs, and we're talking about, per person, I'm wondering if that is the most accurate way to look at it. When we're looking at all of these people who do not currently have a home, are we talking about it's, one person needs one apartment? Well, what about couples, married or not? What about a parent with a child? What about a parent with their own parent? So is there any data on how many of these people would be housed together because they're a family unit or because they're a couple? And would that, if it's $12,000 a year for an apartment, if one guy is living there versus a parent and two children, or a parent and their senior citizen family member who can't work and also needs a home and needs someone to take care of them, does that change the numbers at all? Does that maybe lower the number of units we're looking at if we're not assuming each unhoused person is a unit that needs to be found for them?
That's absolutely fair, and it does in some respects. At the same time, in Adams County, we have much larger families with children, and the largest family we've so far helped has had 2 parents and 7 children. So the housing costs through the roof, literally and figuratively. Because you need a lot of bedrooms according to HUD and according to building code and according to fire code for that many people. So that does drive up costs. And the study that I cited, you're 100% right, Jillian. It was for individuals because that's where the jail costs come in, right? So that's why the DOJ did that study. And the Department of Justice is making the argument that it makes more sense to house people than it does to put them into our incarceration system.
Yeah.
But to your point, yes, there's a wide variety of households that experience homelessness, and that will drive the cost of housing too. That said,
is there any data?
Housing. No, go ahead.
Is there any data about percentage where it's like we're looking at 9,000 people who need help versus we need help for 400 families?
Right. So we do have that from both the HMIS system as well as the point in time data. I'll share with you the point in time data because I have it right in front of me. So household type across the 7 counties in the Denver metro region, adults only, 6,495. Now that can be adults with, those are actually households, but it could be a couple without children included in that type of household. But generally speaking, you only need 1 bedroom for that. So the costs are usually the same. Families with children, 18 and under, or under 18, probably under 18. There were 2,101 in the Denver metro area. Most of those fortunately were sheltered. Not entirely though. And then this is the part that really, this is the type of household we don't typically think of, but it's youth only. And that can mean that it's a 18 or 19-year-old or a 17-year-old or a 15-year-old. It can be a 17-year-old with a baby. Youth only are counted as an entirely separate category by HUD because they have very different support needs and very different, well, I shouldn't say very different, but typically have much different support needs than a household with adults only or with only young children, but somebody there is at least over the age of 18 and can qualify to get housing, because if you're under 18 or under 25, you can't even apply for housing. I mean, you can't even rent a car if you're under 25, so.
Yeah. So anyway, so sorry to have to bring this to a close. I know, Doug, you've got your hand up, but maybe if you have another question, we can maybe just send it directly to you.
Absolutely.
Is that all right? And
Sure, I can do that.
Is that okay? Yeah, sorry about that. We
Thank
do
you.
have another person that we need to get up here.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope
Thank you for all the work that you do, because
Well, thank
it's important work.
it's interesting to look at all the different systems and all the different variables and figuring out how can we find a pathway forward through this. So,
Yeah.
but there's usually a way. Usually takes longer than we want, but there's usually a way.
Excellent. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I know this is not your first time here, so thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you all.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank
for doing this
you.
work.
All right. And so our next guest is Kate Cook. And Kate, thank you for hanging on.
Not a
Really
problem.
appreciate that. And I believe that it was under the recommendation of Miguel that you are with us here today to talk about opportunities for us to be able to support the community.
Okay. Well, so the approach that I was taking on this was an understanding that you as a board would like to be part of our community outreach and engagement. And I just want to confirm that I have that correct. Is that
I
Is
will
that
need
correct?
somebody who is here.
Yes,
for-
because
yes.
it is basically the best option for this board, given what the city attorney's office has shared with us about our limitations. So diplomatically, they suggested that we stick with things that are already underway. Yeah, so.
okay?
And then
Well,
still, just as a reminder, anything that the board chooses to do still needs council approval, since it's got funds attached to it, so.
Got it. Okay. So as far as having the board of come to one of our events and engage with the public, that's pretty straightforward. And I guess I look to you to, I don't know that you would have to go to council for that, because there's not really a cost associated with that other than your time.
If you just want to if the board just wants to participate, support, volunteer, I think they recently did that, also paid for the artist, but did that, that's totally open, and yes, absolutely.
Right. So I'll start with that. I think personally, the best events for this board, really for any group, be it our PRL vision plan or any of those types of events, is to focus on the events where we have like a lot of community interaction. So that would be like the summer block party, the World Music Showcase, which last year was called the Around the World Street Fair. This year it'll be the World Music Showcase, and then Westie Fest. Those are kind of the three big ones. This year we had neighbor nights, and we had a couple of members from Inclusivity at Friday night's neighbor night. This was a first attempt this year. We did every Thursday night since May, we've used the 4 different mobile assets that we have to pop up at 4 different locations over throughout the city. So we started off at College Hill. We went to McFall Park. We've been downtown, and we've been at the Irving Street Library. You know, it was kind of hit and miss. The weather has a huge impact. So we ranged anywhere from 800 people when it was combined with a movie in the park to 0 people if it rained and it was cold. We had about 35 people last Friday night, which was nice. It was a very, you know, a lot easy to talk to people and stuff like that. Next year, we're going to put all 4 of the mobile assets together, pair it with a movie, and have it be kind of not as big as the summer block party, but bigger than just individual trailers out there. So you would have the Wild Wagon, you'd have Park and Play, you'd have Art a la carte, and then the library to go. Those are our 4 mobile assets paired with a movie. So that tends to have really good family engagement, a lot of diversity in attendance. And I think that would be a really good fit for your group as far as reaching out and talking about your message and sort of what you're trying to do in the city. Same with Summer Block Party, World Music Showcase, Westy Fest. The events that aren't going to work as well for you guys, and I'll just be honest, 4th of July, people are coming to watch fireworks and hang out with their family. They kind of stay in their pods. Westy Craft Beer Fest has, well, first of all, kids aren't allowed, so that's limited. And then Top Taco. And I have to pause for 1 second. Just 1 second here. I'm just going to turn off my camera for half a second.
Beer Fest, is that what it was called?
Westy Brew.
Crafts.
Brew Fest.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I guess they do say Craft Brew Fest, but.
So she was saying the 4 mobile
Who
assets.
attended the subcommittee meeting on the community support? I didn't see any minutes for that.
Because there's not, we just
Yes,
record them.
right.
There's not minutes for subcommittee meetings.
That's right.
They're recorded. They're video
Okay.
recorded and posted on the
Right.
webpage.
Oh,
And
somehow missed that.
yeah, and usually Jake sends out the links to any ones that happened between. Rich was on it. I think Doug was there.
Okay.
Do you guys remember who was there? We had a few last month, so they kind of were running together.
Yeah, I
We
think
invited
Justin was
everybody,
there.
so
Okay.
Justin was there.
Okay. Yeah, so go.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead and, like Rich and Doug, you can jump in at any point if it relates to anything that you talked about in the subcommittee meeting, because I missed that.
Well, most of what we talked about in the subcommittee meeting was that, according to the city attorney, we can't really do much of anything, period.
Okay, okay.
It was a little depressing,
Less
yeah.
diplomatic a response than I
Yes,
gave.
but we still have
But can you
funds to
guys-
allocate.
You have
Can you guys
7,000.
attend?
Oh,
Can
yeah,
you
we can attend.
events?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can always attend. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
But we
But they
have
what-
money.
Yeah, so Kate, to clarify, they have a small amount of dollars. They have $7,000. And what they'd really like to do, and tell me if I'm speaking out of turn, but my understanding is the board would like to spend that money to support community efforts, building support, community building things. So like talking about artifacts and, being the ones who sponsor the snacks and the drinks, and maybe we have some of the board there to volunteer, would be a way to support and give. What we learned from the city attorney's office is that there is a lot of potential liability if we come to a point where we have to, and Kate can also contribute to this. She's had this conversation
I
with
ran into
the
the same
ProSab
thing.
board, but basically we can't tell anybody no. So if you have a grant or a neighborhood party, or besides the financial challenges we have to be a transparent government with taxpayer dollars, on top of that, you have a city liability that if you turn anyone down, it can become potentially financially and politically problematic. So they've basically told us if we're going to do anything like that, everybody gets whatever they ask for. So probably not the right way to go about things. You run into some issues. The example that was given was Boston. They ended up in a pretty ugly financial and legal battle, and then had to not only pay a group that under they said they were a Christian organization, but it was more potentially a white supremacist organization. They not only had to fly their flag at the city municipal building, but had to pay them and go to court and pay all those fees for denying the request to fly the flag. So our city is going to say, no, you can't do any of that. No group around here is going to say yes or no to another group.
Okay.
Can I add in?
Are we legally allowed to sponsor a city
things
event?
Because there's city already sort of sanctioned.
Right.
Supported by the city council, supported by the organization. And that's sort of where we ended up here is
Perfect.
This is the safest avenue.
Just want to make sure that I'm clear on
work.
what had been discussed with the legal team. Great. Perfect. Okay.
So one other aspect that we talked about is we'd really like this to go to events that encourage inclusivity, that really foster that.
Yep.
And I guess one of the concerns I had about the bringing all of the outreach things together in one spot is the ability for some of the community not be able to get to those because they don't have transportation. The buses don't go there. It's not walkable, things like that.
So next year we'll be taking the same approach. They won't all be in one place. We'll still go out in the community because the goal is to take those resources out to the community. So we'll hit those spots like Irving Street, College Hill, and we try to make sure that there is, transportation to those. The nice thing is that you do get, just in looking at who comes to those events, you get a lot of families, you get a lot of diversity there. So they tend to be a very broad reaching of everyone brings their kids and it's just a really good, I can't like a better word than vibe, but it's just, it's very family and very inclusive. So it's kind of, that would be easy for you to be there. The neighbor nights was equally easy. It was, it provided a chance for members to talk about inclusivity, to talk about, what's going on in Westminster and, do a little bit of painting. But as far as artifacts, definitely could use sponsors, especially or volunteers, especially on a Saturday, because I have personally some conflicts. But yeah, there's definitely volunteer if you want to come and just be there while the museum's open. Are you guys all familiar with artifacts? Should I give just like the little 2-line?
Yeah, you sure?
So,
yes, you should give a better one than I did.
Yeah. So we applied for and received a small grant, so $25,000 grant to do a pop-up community museum. And the focus of it is family treasures that tell the story of our community. But we wrote the grant really focusing on underrepresented voices, knowing that these are the voices who haven't had a standard, consistent place to tell their story. And so I'm using, well, in the grant application, I used navigator, but then once we got the grant, we're like, ooh, we probably shouldn't use the term navigators. We don't want to confuse people with our homeless navigators. So we hired community ambassadors. So people who actually you guys put me in touch with, I ended up hiring the Tallahan Yekab through contact with the Inclusivity Board. So we, really reached out to members of our community that we had met through festivals, through applications, who represented different populations of our community. So I have 3 ambassadors on board, and they're reaching out to the Hmong community, Korean, Lao, Nepalese, and then I also have a contract with Museo de las Americas, and our Westminster Historical Society. And so we're doing this as a pop-up. It'll run the month of October. We got donated space in downtown Westminster off the plaza. So it's basically it's a temporary museum installation. I'm not curating it because the whole purpose of a museum like this is to be driven by the people who participate. So it's going to be a mystery to me as to what we get, but please come. I think it's going to be wonderful. Our ambassadors are pretty excited. And like I said, we'll be running from October 7th through the 29th, Wednesday through Friday, and then Saturdays, Sundays. And I believe, I'm not sure if the times are up. They should be up on our website here pretty soon. So there's volunteer opportunities. The grant is pretty much covering the cost of the museum. We want to do a little opening event from like 6 to 8 on that first Saturday evening, and inviting our ambassadors and council members. I'd love to invite the Inclusivity board, and just kind of open the museum with a little bit of, hey, this is fun, kind of rah, rah, rah. But even then, I don't expect that that's going to be $7,000. I mean, it's like I'm $50 for some cookies.
If there's anything that we can do though to help make it more special or to make it really what you want it to be, let us know, because that seems like a perfect way for us to show up for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Alan, do you have a question?
Yeah. So Kate, does the $25,000 grant, do you have money for, let's say, translators? Because you were mentioning, for example, Hmong, Nepalese, Lao, Vietnamese, but along with headsets that there are people who can, I saw this done at Irving Street Library when they were having, and also in Spanish, they were doing that when they were talking about the Irving Street Library outside park area, and they hired a translator and people were wearing headsets.
That is super interesting. We had not done that. My ambassadors are all multilingual, so they're very comfortable translating, but I love that idea. If you guys wanted to add that, I probably don't have the budget to add something like that to. It's a pretty lean budget. I put the bulk of the money is in paying the ambassadors for their time to reach out to the community. We have a small budget then for sort of, display supplies. And then we were fortunate to have the space donated. But yeah, that would be phenomenal.
That's a great idea.
That's something the lawyers will say is okay.
Well, it's the council that will have to say it's okay.
Yeah.
With the lawyer too.
There's a lawyer who sits with the council, but I feel like that's a pretty easily sold item. So
do we have a sense of what that might run cost wise? So we can put together something of a dollar value to present to council?
Parks, recreation and libraries might have an idea because they were the ones who did the Irving Street Library.
Yeah, Amy from the library. Might know.
What's the date of this event? Just, I want to make sure that from a timing standpoint, we can make this happen.
Right. It runs October 7th through the 29th. The way that I've been approaching this is that, except maybe it's not the whole event.
Right.
Maybe we offer translation, on certain days, and if that ends up towards the end, that's okay. The other thing I've had to sort of let go is I don't know that all the display items are all going to be there on day one. So I think that as it's open, additional items will come in, and I've had to really, the linear part of me has had to relax and accept that. But I think it's going to be cool because I think it'll make it, come back. We can use that from a social media standpoint. So I'm not, if we want to do translation, if you want to support that, we'll fit it in and then we can promote that as well. And I think that's a fabulous aspect.
Yep.
Go ahead. If the ambassadors are already going to be there and in a position to provide translation, you can buy a 10-person portable translation / tour guide system for $600.
Oh, wow.
So, definitely could get a bunch of sets of equipment for members of the crowd to get translation from the ambassador or whoever.
That would be awesome.
I think that would be an appropriate
Yeah.
purchase. Actually, that would be an amazing purchase just to have within the city for events like this in the future.
Special events, and cultural affairs, that's a good
I
idea.
love
Yeah,
it.
kind of have it at
That's
the
what we
checkout
do.
throughout
Yeah.
the city. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Just-
it wouldn't
just-
just be special events. You could be all city events.
Yeah.
That
Yep.
that would be
Right.
I
amazing.
love it.
Town
And
halls.
just to pick a nit, it's not translation, it's interpretation.
Right,
Anyone
you.
who does
Okay.
that will tell you it's interpretation.
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Pick those nits.
But,
It's a good mid.
I agree, you guys should own one. Yeah.
Yeah, there you
That's a
go.
fabulous idea.
Fantastic. So we'll probably need a
Oh.
motion on this. So does anyone want to move the recommendation of the purchase of an interpretation system for special events?
You just did it. Second.
Okay, there you go.
I have a friendly amendment. I believe the name of the thing that you will most easily find it is translation headsets
Okay.
/ simultaneous, like if you Google translation headsets, that will, and do shopping.
We'll make sure that level of detail gets to council,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
That'll get you a bunch of options.
All right, do we have any further discussion on this?
Yes. How
Perfect.
many should we be
Exactly.
proposing to purchase?
How much money do we have?
About
Well, it's been a while. So pre-COVID, it was pretty rare to have more than a few. I'm saying like a handful, and even the first town halls, maybe a handful. So I think starting with 10 is a great idea. Also because this is a month long, I don't know how many, maybe 100 people show up at one night, Kate.
I know,
And
but that could
then we'll
be
have to order more,
fantastic.
but I don't.
We should be so lucky.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah,
So maybe
exactly.
start with one order and go from there.
Yeah, let's do that. And let's see how well that works. And that might be, something for the city to contemplate expanding if there is, need
Yep.
expressed in future years.
I have one suggestion,
Yes.
which is maybe we don't need a whole lot of units, but you might want more than one set.
I was thinking
Yeah,
the
for
same
different
thing
languages.
too. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
add that to your motion.
To your friendly amendment.
So
So
then I
let
Properly
me,
give that to the city.
yeah, exactly. So your friendly amendment reads what exactly?
So friendly amendment to purchase 2 or 3 small sets of headsets, transmitters.
I think we
And how
need to
many
be precise.
receivers
I would
are
say
there in
3,
that
but
set?
Okay, 3.
Yep. So that would be for the transmitters, and then
Yeah,
how many receivers per transmitter?
I think it depends on what you decide to buy,
Okay.
basically.
All right.
I'm
Do we,
sure there's ones where
rather
you
than
can get
doing
30.
that, do we want to set like maybe a dollar figure that then sort of caps us?
yeah. I was
Okay,
gonna say,
perfect.
do we want to change it to spend up to X amount on
I-
this
Well, we have 6,000 left, or was it 7?
7?
Seven.
So want to say $1,000 for this?
I think
Or
that's a
no,
lovely
we need more than
number.
that, 3,000?
Yeah,
There's 600
Sure,
apiece.
make it 3,000, and if it's only
Well, let's see if Kate
1,000.
has anything else we can spend our money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he has other ideas.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, Kate, do you have other things, or do you feel like a larger expenditure in this direction is actually going to be beneficial for you?
I think a larger expenditure in that direction has great utility citywide, because it's not
Great.
just special events that does events. I mean, it's all of our departments are all doing outreach, and,
Yep.
and theoretically, I know I was being a little selfish. I was like, wow. So if we ended up with, say, art a la carte students, then,
That's a great idea. Mhm.
yeah.
Yes.
So it's almost like it becomes a library item that you could check out, and
Yes.
yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah, like
Perfect.
the whisper
All right.
devices that we use on the buses. Yeah,
Right.
I think that's awesome.
Or we
An
have
awesome contribution to the city.
frontline staff have devices, handheld devices that help
Yeah.
when somebody comes to like the rec center.
Yep. Love that.
And just one other question, do these also work for like part of hearing people?
It can, I think, right?
Seth, you're doing the research over there.
I think probably, I mean, as far as I know, the basic setup is you've got one person who's a tour guide or an interpreter or something like that who is a transmitter, and everybody else wears a set of headphones, and you just, whatever they say into their little.
And you have a little
Yeah.
box with a volume control for
Right.
yourself. So I think to your point, I think, yeah, there is definitely an opportunity
So would
there.
we need more for some of us who are getting our?
If it's an initial purchase and we say, wow, this is fantastic, we could always do it again.
Exactly, exactly. I
Yeah.
would say
And we'll have a
3,000
good,
sounds.
you have the
like
month
a
of
good number.
September to figure out if it.
Love it. Love it.
October, sorry.
October, yes, exactly.
We're in September now.
Perfect. Okay, so Seth, let's revise your amendment real
So-
quick.
So we have a motion to spend up to $3,000 to purchase 3 small sets of headsets / transmitters / translation headsets for to become city assets, basically.
Perfect. That sounds like a good motion.
Accepted.
Well, I don't know that we want to specify how many sets. If we just set the dollar amount,
Oh, I see
whatever
what you're
that
saying.
can be spent on is good.
Fair enough, fair enough. Does everybody kind of in agreement on that?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, good, thank you.
Do you want to say anything about it being used for community-focused events and activities? So it doesn't, not that it would happen, but then it's not a staff. You know what I mean? Like I don't know.
So this would actually be
every day, but Kate and the
Right.
group, those who are doing community outreach as a regular part of their job.
What is the name of your group, Kate, so we can be specific in this?
Oh, gosh, what is our name? Well, we're technically in operations. We're kind of special events, but we're not really special
Right.
events anymore. So it's like,
Maybe we just say parks operations.
yeah, maybe
Yeah.
do it that way.
Okay,
And Jake does community outreach as part of his job, so
Exactly.
Jake and his team could use it, but maybe it's for the primary use of community outreach events and activities.
Yeah.
And that can include town halls, yes?
Yeah.
Great.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for those we usually invite, we usually go through a outside vendor who specifically works in interpretation so that they're doing it on, as it's happening, as opposed to having a bilingual person who's on council or on staff. It's usually a hired out.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, sorry. We have
All right, so, okay, yeah, exactly. We do have 8 minutes, so we'll get there, we'll get there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and have a fully revised, actually, Doug, is it okay if we go ahead and rescind all former motions and we just re-go? We'll do it properly here? All right. So Seth is typing madly and I know what that means. It means he's got the verbiage.
So motion to spend up to $3,000 of the amended motion, incorporating all the discussion.
Could be the new motion. We could rescind all former motions.
Motion to spend up to $3,000 of board budget to purchase multiple small sets of translation headsets, simultaneous interpretation headsets plus transmitters, to be used for community-focused events and activities.
Oh,
There you
nice.
Right, there you go.
A thing of beauty.
Hey, Seth.
Sounds great. Okay, good. So we have a second by Rich. Is that what I heard? Perfect. All right. Any last discussion? Great.
Great.
We're going to go ahead and go to a vote then. All in favor? Looks like we've got a unanimous. Yep, we're unanimous. All right. Perfect. So Kate, back to you. Is there anything else? I mean, now that we've got the wallet open, right? Is there anything else that you think that honestly our funding could really do wonders for you?
I think that right there, because I had a chance to talk with Cody more, and like the mural, it's not a true it's inclusive in the sense that we want anybody to come, but it's just, we want everyone to come. It doesn't have sort of a larger message. So I'm not sure that your funding really aligns with, pizza for the volunteers and stuff like that. So Adam's working on corporate sponsorship for that type of stuff. So I think for to have that for Artifacts will be awesome. I can brag when I go to the statewide meeting next week. So
Yay, that's
so
great.
awesome. Thank you.
That's great. That's good. And then are there any, let me see here. We've got Westy Fest coming up.
If you guys want a booth,
That was one thing that was on our list to talk about is whether or not we would be in attendance. Is that something that just a casual straw poll here? Folks interested in that?
We don't pay for the booth, but I will say it is important to have a purpose and something you're going to do, give, converse about.
Yep.
Hand out,
Play a game.
whatnot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I likely will not be able to be there to support you that day.
Yep, exactly. And unfortunately, I am leaving town that day.
And it's pretty close. We're about 6 weeks out. So.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would also, I don't want to speak for the whole group. I know, Rich, we've done a couple of things. That one year we actually helped with the games to be more interactive. One year we had a table and then we haven't done it for a while. The
That's the one that
table
blew
year
away.
was sort of, I don't know that was.
Was not very successful.
It wasn't. And so
I'll be
that's
honest
why
with
I
you,
don't
because I
know
was
that this
there.
is the best place to build community, you know, but it's sort of a.
I will say also the year when we helped out with games at the Halloween Fest.
Right.
Well,
This is the new version of that.
Okay, so I felt like I was not able to accomplish anything for the board.
Yeah, right, other than wearing your T-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
So like if a nonprofit's there that, they're fundraising or bringing awareness, businesses are there sort of doing the same thing. It's, you really have to have the right activity or something, a draw to make it interesting and engaging for whoever's working the table or booth, but also for whoever's there.
Right. So in the interest of time, I guess I'm going to kind of wrap this up, but also to leave an open door for you, Kate, to just wrap your head around some other opportunities that you might see. Our funding it's still good until the end of the year.
Right. There won't be any in 2024.
Correct, but it's still good until the end of the year. So that gives us a little bit of running room because we still have 3 additional meetings by our board. So, and, if you do know of any other, departments within the city that you think could benefit from something like these microphones, something that does help to bring people into a scenario that they wouldn't normally be in, that would be great. So we would love to hear from you if there is anything, but no pressure to find anything on our behalf, but please do put the word out.
Okay.
Am I correct that we could approve spending the money outside of a regular monthly meeting, that we could schedule a special meeting to approve
Like a
something if it
subcommittee.
came
You
up
could
and we needed
schedule
to
a
do it?
special meeting. You
Right.
could schedule a special meeting. All of this still has to be approved by council. So whatever
course,
the
yeah.
motion is, Seth makes, then I'll take to Mayor Pro Tem and ask him to talk about it on Monday.
Yeah, I just
So we have
didn't
to
want
be-
Kate to
yeah.
think that she had to wait
Oh.
until,
Oh, no, if
October,
something comes
November.
up, yeah.
No,
We could have a special meeting and you could vote.
Yeah.
You would have to have a quorum. We just barely made that tonight, so.
Yeah.
Just food for thought.
Yep,
But
it's tougher to do that. So anyway, thank you, Kate, so much. I think what we
Thank you.
accomplished was amazing. I was not expecting it to go in that direction, and I'm glad it did.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you,
again,
Alan.
our door is always open. And then just for the interest of being true to the meeting agenda, just to at least touch on, we didn't have a city council report tonight because the mayor pro tem is not with us, but they are deep in budget stuff anyway, so there really wouldn't have been a whole lot to report on that front.
There's a budget study session on Monday night. So it'll be a multipurpose room if you want to listen in.
Yep.
They talk about board and commission reimagining them. They're gonna, I think the current guidance, nothing definitive. They're gonna talk more, but they're gonna look at an ad hoc group, maybe to focus on a specific issue in 2024. I think that's sort of where the council and staff is working toward what that might look like. So we'll be seeing what those sorts of different structures look like.
Perfect.
There's
Tune in.
things that have to go.
Yep, tune in. And when is the expected discussion and then vote expected on that sort of that level of change?
There's no date on that.
Okay.
Because there will have to be code and ordinances, so still in the
Right.
works. They had the conversation 3 weeks ago.
So will that happen prior to elections? Because there might, I mean,
I'm
if
not
it,
sure.
okay. Because we don't know if there's gonna be a turnover or not, so, okay.
And it's not to disband any current group. It's to try an ad hoc approach to see what happens with having groups that have a specific identified project initiative to work on.
Great, perfect. And then also, let's see here, and then I think that's it. Everything else was kind of left over from last meeting. So unless there is any last thing that is burning a hole on the agenda here that we're missing, I think we're going to call ourselves adjourned. Yeah, okay, it's 7:31. Sorry,
Nice job.
Cody.
Well, my